See, honestly, it's really heartening to actually even listen talking about healthcare and digital healthcare. I still remember when I did my startup, or when I decided to do my startup in end of 2014. And then talking about healthcare and digital part of healthcare was just there are few of us, very, very small set of outliers going around and talking about it. And now, if you see the number of healthcare apps that actually are coming, number of healthcare solutions, number of healthcare VC fundings that are really going on, I think it's a fabulous time to really talk about digital and healthcare, and being part of a country that is so young and also so adaptive to technologies and so adaptive for a change, is what makes me really motivated to be part of this time and this part of the ecosystem at this point in time. So what are we doing, right? So initially, when GeoHealth Hub actually started, this started as an idea way back in 2016, 2017, even when I was not part of the system. It initially started just like, the space of being that, how do we connect and make healthcare accessible? The physical healthcare, which is provided by clinics, hospitals, and there were a lot of diagnostic labs, sort of like that glue between getting our mobility users as they're coming online, access to the physical healthcare. But I think we all went through this COVID wave of 2020 when healthcare actually massively shifted from being purely physical to digital to now mostly digital systems right now. So now doctor consults are mostly virtual. We use social media apps. We actually pay via payments. Our health reports come via WhatsApp. Even our health records are also visible on a share online, and that we can. Our biggest store of data today is no more is probably the photos.google.com. So where a lot of our actually records are being stored. So what are, from GeoHealth perspective, like where most of the apps today are focused on, platforms are being focused on is, hey, do you want to create these two-sided marketplaces, just like an Uber, with connecting the patients to doctors, patients to labs, and so on? Or there are like Swiggy-like marketplaces that are coming around. Like, how do we actually ensure that the tests actually reach to the home if I cannot physically translate there? Now, there is the third part of the workflow that someone has to go and fill, which is all about how do we connect these various, what I call as sectored workflows that are fragmented on their own. So we, being part of an ecosystem that is extremely user-focused, as Geo platforms, we started focused on, if we have to build a patient-centric ecosystem, and the first ring of a user is pretty much my family of concern. And how can we empower this person to manage their health and also manage the health of the family members using the digital ecosystem that is being created by a lot of other players. So that's essentially where we are coming in. Think of like, it's not like it started on day zero as the plan, but as we went on being part of this, and then we kept on repivoting, and then the industry actually had moved at such a rapid pace, allowed us to sort of like say that, hey, being that center and essentially creating that rings of influence around is where we would focus. So that's what GeoHealth and is focused on. It is, if in a single word, if I have to say it in a single sentence, it is about being that personalized, intelligent, a health agent that empowers every individual to manage his or her health and their family health, and nudge them towards being a better health outcomes. So that's where we are focused on, and that's what we are.
It's a comprehensive package, if I say, right? Not just about finding doctors, but tests and other things included. And you mentioned the rapid progress we have seen in the last few months or years in healthcare. How much does the COVID pandemic impacted this project you worked on? How much was it it's a motivator?
Oh, personally, I think if given a chance, I mean, I wouldn't have. I was so extremely. I was very, very lucky to be part of this initiative at Geo. So how do I? Okay, so I think there are waves that we can talk about, and the waves of demonetization, when someone who is working on the financial segments would actually say that, hey, we were just lucky. And then the whole wave of UPI happened at the same time, when right place at the right time. I think for health tech, it is COVID is sort of like that right place at the right time moment. And the thing about when we talked about, I think you talked about some of the very interesting numbers, right? India is a huge populous country. India also has there is this continuous thing of about like we have a massive digital user base of smartphone users, but we also have a non-smart, non-digital users. So it could be like both from who are the older people as well as a lot of younger generation. Health is something that ties all of us together. The billion and half that numbers that you talked about impact each and every one of us. The baby who is newborn to all the way to a person who is really needs of healthcare. My great grandfather as well have the same health needs, right? They need to be taken care of. So how do we bring accessibility and how do we bring availability of healthcare solutions to each one of them are very different. So, for example, to talk about saying that a person who is probably about like 100 kilometers away from the nearest healthcare facility had the same needs to access the COVID, for example, like the COVID care treatment or the same sort of like the supply needs and the demand needs were same irrespective of where they were located. So it helped us to sort of accelerate and create a lot of what I call as innovative ideas. We used, for example, Twitter became a means of communication for a long time during that wave period, because that's where, hey, here is a bed available, anyone needs it. So people came with very, very innovative solutions. And what happened post that, and WhatsApp became probably the only means of communication for us to know who is healthy or not. And I think there were not so many days when we would wake up in the morning to find out, hey, what is the SPO2 of this person? Did we even know that what SPO meant 3 years back? I didn't. So the knowledge of health, the knowledge of health parameters, the knowledge of being healthy, and the knowledge of tracking healthy is now ingrained in all of us. So I think that's the biggest difference between, I would actually say, pre-COVID and post-COVID. The onus is on us to actually say, how do we take that forward rather than go back into those old days?
I think, yeah, you're completely correct. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, COVID, the pandemic has been, has brought a lot of distress, like a lot of people lost their dear ones. But yeah, this transition that's happened, and even I can watch, I started using a Fitbit, right? Very, like few months back. And now, like you pointed out, now I'm also aware about this health statistics, right? Or today I didn't walked the 10,000 steps, or like you pointed out, SPO2, and the people were I mean, there was a shortage of this pulse oximeters as well back then. Now coming to the technology part, India AI being India AI, it is, we focus on AI and ML, and we believe, and as well as our country's motivation to encourage the AI situation is responsible AI for social empowerment, right? So we believe AI as a technology, like internet as a platform we have seen, or electricity before that, has this potential to transform our healthcare system, especially the rural healthcare system. So what is the role of AI and ML in Geo Health platform?
Right. So I will just add one point to when you showed the health. My mother actually, who is also uses health band, and she never used it in her life. And every time the number goes beyond a certain value, she would come and say, hey, is this a problem or not? Yeah. See, so I think that's actually the beginning of the problem, which I would answer now to your second question. How can AI play a role? So think of like, the whole reasoning, I think the medical reasoning or clinical reasoning is the hardest problem that the mankind ever has to solve, because there is a lot of variability, and the data is all, so in a matrix of decision making for anyone to really make, in this case, a doctor, there is only a certain amount of truth, certain amount of temporal information that is available, and certain amount of data, a very small amount of data that is actually available to make a decision here. To build a truly intelligent system that can augment these beautiful intelligent brains so that they can make better decisions is where I think AI can really proliferate in this market. So I'll give an example, right? So when we were doing this COVID wave 2, and it became very apparent when all of us were getting blood tests done, and then along with COVID tests also to actually see if various, like our white blood cells count was actually fine. Is our body really fighting X or Y or Z, and so on and so forth. There are actually 100,000 labs in our country, and each one was generating their own reports in so many formats. It's a simple CBC test would actually give you different forms of different forms, not just in variety of standardization, language, talk about diversity that we can have in India. So if one way of looking at this problem is as an OCR, PDF reader, or an image reader, we have beautiful AI models. We can read the text, read some of these various unstructured data formats, and then convert them into text. But text is not what is sufficient for a doctor in this case, right? Because we are getting tested almost every day. We can't throw this text into a WhatsApp and then throw it on the doctor. But if you look from a scope problem, this is all about saying that, hey, in a constrained space of the health parameter reading, what we have done, for example, is that we added this AI ML workflows as part of our continuous, like converted this data into, think of like an actionable health state. So we interpret the data and then analyze it on behalf of the doctor, because these are well-published diagnostic publications that come from our own ICMR and others, and then actually convert that into, here is a temporal value of this reading over a period of time. And not just one reading. Now imagine I can see my hemoglobin, I can actually see my RBC count, I can actually see my various other counts that the doctor would actually see in one shot. This is, as a computers, any computer scientist, we are aware that this is how we do our financial asset tracking. We actually do even our own performance tracking for our own for memory or CPU, or for our services tracking, and so on and so forth. Sort of like something very similar, put it into the workflows of the user. So the managed health dashboards that we actually have built empowers now a doctor to actually like have a conversation that is data driven on a temporal series with a patient, and then the system sort of like translates. It's now a language translation. So my mother, for example, who is a Telugu native speaker, can still talk in Telugu, can input the data in Telugu, and the doctor could actually be in Hindi or in English, and then can see the same dashboards in their language and then have a communication. So in a nutshell, so behind the scenes, there's a lot of AI stuff going on. There's a deep learning model running there. There is an ML model, there's interpreter, there's everything that is running.
An NLP with the language also, right?
Yeah, it's like it's focused on the what actually is really required from a doctor perspective. So they are managing so many patients. They need to context switch to this person of context, and then see, and the context is actually their data, the prior data of this person. And so rather than straining the memory of this doctor, and imagine this doctor is actually on a WhatsApp and trying to switch across context. So instead of it, we come back and actually say that, hey, here is the context of this person, and in this new data variable change that just happened, here is what has changed. And then now communication can also be now to all the concerned, can actually go back and say, highlight out and say that, hey, because of this change, here is what has happened. So going back to what GeoHealth is really focused on, going back where I said as a vision statement, we're going after being that personalized intelligent system. Being personalized is all about, we let the doctor be in the language of the doctor, their own the context of the doctor. Similarly, from a patient, the language of the patient, the context of the patient or the family. So that's where the personalization comes in. The intelligence comes because the context actually goes in the treatment process. And hence, once it goes, then we can actually build a lot of forwarding workflows on top of it. So that's where we are.
So it reminded me of two big challenges, or two big debates we generally have. One is, of course, even forget digital health, even if you go to an offline hospital, let's say the hospital I've been going for 10 years, and if you look at my health file, there isn't much there. They will be the medicines they prescribed and maybe a 1 or 2 line notes, which doctors being doctors only they can read. So though, and it's not comprehensive, it doesn't give a, how do I say, thorough information on how my health was, let's say after my last consultation and this consultation, right? Did I had any conditions and further things. And secondly, there is this thing, you being a data scientist and a AI researcher, this big question about AI and automation taking jobs, and we argue that there is a lot of augmentation that will happen rather than replacement. And this is a classic case of AI augmenting a doctor, right? I mean, we are getting this range of information, in front of him, so that he can make a well-informed decision, much well-informed decision as well. And yes, of course, a lot of data is needed, and healthcare data is a very sensitive topic, and as well as there is a lack of it. Now, my question is something that everyone, even our readers, will be worried. How do we ensure that this data, being harnessed or collected through this healthcare platform, is its safety is ensured, and how these models are used responsibly? How is responsible AI is ensured?
I think it's a very good question and also a very pertinent question. So I would, so prior to joining Geo, I was part of Microsoft, and trusted platform is ingrained to us as part of in my blood. If you cut, you'll see only trusted ecosystems. That's what I think Microsoft has taught me. So anyway, so when luckily as health was moving into from a physical to digital, so by that time we also had very good models that were already there in other domains. For example, both in finance as well as in others. And social media probably was at its best, or what we actually say at its peak, when we really decision health was starting. So when GeoHealth was starting, we actually made the consent as an explicit platform requirement. So for example, data can come from a provider A, or from a user, or from a system. In this case, for example, the health band that you're wearing could actually be communicating via Bluetooth to your device, and from there it's going to your app, and from there it's going to cloud. Right. So and from cloud, where is it going to? Right. So imagine that if the data store is an explicit locker that you own, and then from any forwarding workflow on top of it requires explicit consent from the user. In that case, you are building a transparent system. So at least like we are guarding, saying that, hey, your inserts are all accessible. A write is user approved. Read is user approved with the user consent. And but the challenge though in this case is that but what is that read asset that you're really talking about, right? So for example, if a doctor is trying to access certain treatment of me for about, let's say, about 9 days or a 20-day period, it cannot be that every time that clicking on record, I get an OTP saying, hey, do you want to give your consent, and so on. So health actually has this unique, what we call as specific workflow requirements, where a specific time period of access can actually be given. So in GeoHealth, we actually do have, if you see, there is that explicit consent as a workflow is there. It's available to the user, and they can see exactly who is having access to their data and for which period of time, and it can be revoked as well. So it is both an opt-in and an opt-out mechanism, but people are really trying across the world right now in two types of workflows. But okay, so the other side of the story actually is that while we are working on it, Government of India has really worked towards creating this whole health account with ABHA. And NDHM has been clearly like what we call as a guiding principle for a lot of the digital healthcare apps that were coming in. So if you really see, the DigiLocker or the Health Locker is built to be exactly this. And then any HIUs, we call them as the health information user, can seek permission from this Health Locker. So we have been working very closely with NDHM to ensure that this consent that is being driven is actually time-based tokens versus like this access-based single access tokens, and so on and so forth. So that is one. From a privacy standpoint, we are ensuring that the data privacy, the user information, is extremely valuable to them. Second, actually, if you really see, right? So there is the second problem of data duplicacy, which is also a huge problem, right? What if so I gave a consent, for example, to you to access my health data. So once you pull my data, what are you going to do with it? We call this as forwarding data problems that typically happen. So what I think that's something that it's a much larger scale problem. What we are trying to solve from at least GeoHealth is that there is no way the data record is explicitly given to the HIU. What we give is think of like an encrypted blob for the token is accessible, so that the duplicacy can be avoided. But it's a very innovative, it's a classic problem that we have to solve. I think the future of health economics will be defined basis this. So I'll be more than happy to to actually like brainstorm on all these options. But going back to the fundamental point you're saying, right? Privacy and user consent are implicit in our platform, and that's how we have built it.
One question I had, Raku, when you were mentioning, so I have a Fitbit with me. So my question is, how do we get, for example, let's say I'm subscribing or I'm coming to the GeoHealth platform as a user. How do my data will get inputted into the platform? So does my devices sync with it, or let's say if I have some other existing data, health record or something, let's say ECR or something, how do it get incorporated into this?
We enable multiple workflows. Let's take the simplest one. So you have an existing PDF files that, or so maybe an executive health checkup that you have done prior, right? So we have a my health. So just like so we have a health locker, very similar to what NDHM actually provides. The APIs are pretty much now aligned with what NDHM is providing. So think of it like a file store. You can drag and drop your file into it. And then, and first and foremost, it's a record of your systems. You can timeline, you can catalog them based on lab, prescriptions, and various things, like how you have actually been doing, for example, in other cloud storages today. So that's the first problem, right? So when that happens, we sort of like seek your consent, saying that, hey, once you upload it, this is the user-driven workflow I'm talking about. Once you upload the report, then with your consent, we can say, hey, can we peek into this and then create a digital version of this for you? And then we process it and sort of like show you, here is, for example, this lab report is currently containing X or a Y or a Z. Do you agree? If you agree, you say yes. Or if you disagree, then you can say, hey, delete this and change to some other value. So think of like, this is how all your old records are digitized, and they can show up in the health dashboard. So from a provider, in this case, if a lab actually is directly trying to send the data, so we have a lot of empaneled labs directly in our system. So when they send a lab report to you, and then if the test has been booked by us or you have given us consent, the lab can send to us via you. And then the record automatically will show up again. The device in this case, for example, in the case of Fitbit, if you're also using the Google Fit as part of as part of your Android app, and then you have given access to Google Fit for GeoHealth to access the data, then you think of like it's going from Google Fit device to, the Fitbit to Google Fit to GeoHealth. Okay. And then from there onwards, the forwarding workflows are done. So the thing is that, so the short answer to your question actually is that there will never be a one single store of the data. But then as you are bringing data to, for example, this health locker that we have, then the health can be managed. What we promise is that from there onwards, we will be able to manage your health in a visualized way that you can take to actually like manage your conditions.
I think it's a very innovative solution, right? I mean, like you mentioned, we all have a lot of documents lying around, right? The lab scans and the blood tests. I am someone who check my blood every month, right? To check something like cholesterol or sugar. These things
should be our user.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But the problem is, like, how do you make sense of all this data, right? Beyond what the lab highlights and say, hey, this is high, this is high, right? So this is where I think and the entry the way in which you can also sync my other health data from, let's say, all these gadgets, or wearables, that adds much more, right? You get to multiple streams of data about my health, and then it's very, how to say, we can make a very comprehensive inference based on that.
I think so you and I are probably the best examples because we are doing it from a wellness thing. But imagine that someone is actually managing the complications associated with diabetes or with hypertension or with cardiac related stuff, post-op and pre-op and all this stuff, right? So this is where how many times have we gone to a parents or someone have gone to surgery rooms and then saying, hey, the numbers are not right, and they would come back. And so the amount of trauma that someone actually goes through in all of this can now sort of like, and with a completely distributed families that we actually have, some of our family members are in US and other than we don't have a definitive place to actually have the concern talk about this to talk about health state. So coming back to that, one part of the problem is India has a huge disease problem, like almost literally like every family in our country actually has either a diabetes or a hypertension, or one of the problems are always, if nothing else, then we do have asthma. So the unfortunately for us, that's where we are. But so that, and how do we make it not as a problem of concern, but something that, hey, imagine a world where we wake up in the morning and first thing is not launching on the social media apps, but we actually launch, for example, hey, how is everyone fine or not? So does anyone need, or we have a notification that shows up in the morning saying my dad's health has changed to something slightly into a concern right now. And then I sort of like, just like, okay, what's going on? How would that workflow actually be? So I think that's where, so it has an association of the care that we as Indians have implicitly. We care for our family, we care for our friends. So how do we connect and health is something that we do care about.
Yeah.
How do we connect that out? That's actually missing right now. So that's where I think the solution.
So, I know we are running out of time. So one final question, what are the future plans? What are the innovations in pipeline for now?
See, the goal of I think our chairman has always been saying like, hey, we want to have, and it aligns with our prime minister's vision also, is how do we actually get to a better India? And that's the whole thing, right? Like better health outcomes for us. The first problem for any this new world of health apps that we are going after, or health platforms, is that how do we actually create an ecosystem that connects all these seemingly disparate sources into a single source? And then from there, how do we nudge towards ideally a preventive and a better outcome driven system where I have a choice of a number of solutions rather than actually, and also preventively or proactively identifying some of these conditions rather than towards the late stages of it. So our plan, or I would actually say the goal of most of the healthcare digital, like people who have come here, is to actually say, how do we nudge people to come towards that preventive zone, to the proactive zone? So that's where I think we are all after, and that's where I think we should be after as well.